My name is Chris Heaven, and I'm the CEO of Survival Dispatch. I was a member of our national powerlifting team for many years and won many state, national, and world championships. Even though I'm in great shape for being 55 years old, I am not immune to father time. Most of us feel weaker and make more trips to the bathroom as we get older. U.S. Army research has led to a breakthrough for the #1 water for older Americans. It's not a special sports drink, but a mix with essential nutrients most hydration drinks lack. Keyword, hydration. These nutrients are proven to enhance muscle strength, reduce soreness, and improve bladder health. A Texas doctor leveraged this research and formulated a drink mix to help you stay strong. Click the link below for up to 44% off at nativehydrate.com/dispatch, plus free shipping and a free gift. This is one of the best deals I've seen for high-quality BCAA drink mixes. And we're back. And we've got a special surprise night. Maybe not so much of a surprise if you looked at the thumbnail, but we've got Mike Shleby from Forward Observers joined us. This video tonight is brought to you by Native Path. Those are the branched chain amino acid drinks that we opened the video with. They're exceptionally high quality, taste great, and rehydrate you incredibly fast. I've been taking them now, drinking it now for about 6 weeks. Noticeable difference. Number 2, CCW Safe. We'll have them on next week. Actually, maybe the end of this week. I have to double check my calendar. But we've got some really interesting information on self-defense coverage to share with y'all. You might want to look at your policy if you have one right now and see if there's a clawback clause, for example. But we'll talk more about that when CCW Safe comes on. Sawyer water filters. I feel like a weight's been lifted off my shoulders. We've been sent a ton of water treatment, filtration, purification products over the years. The vast majority of them have failed miserably. And I can tell you that Sawyer, made in America, American owned, passed with flying colors. I've got more content coming up on that soon. And our premier sponsor for tonight is Advantage Gold. And myself and Jeremy Blossom, excuse me, will be doing a SHTF webinar on the 21st of the month. We're going to cover some stuff that you won't see anywhere else. And there's a link in the description below. It's the first link. If you click on it and you sign up, Survival Dispatch gets a small stipend for everybody who signs up, whether you attend or not. And if you have a large circle of friends and you'd like to make a little bit of money on the side, excuse me, email support@survivaldispatch.com and I'll get you an affiliate link. And for every person in your circle of friends who signs up, you'll get paid $20. Not a bad deal at all. All right, that is it. Let me bring everybody on stage. Got our in-house Mad Bombers back. S2. He's really incognito tonight. He doesn't even have a fancy avatar or thumbnail tonight.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
All right. And as I mentioned, we've got Mike Shleby from Forward Observer. Good to see you, Mike.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's been a minute. So
It has.
yeah, because of that, I wouldn't do you any justice introducing you. So go ahead and introduce yourself, because I suspect that some of our audience is probably not familiar with you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks again for letting me be here. I'm Mike Shleby, former Intel NCO and intelligence contractor. And I started back in 2016. I started tracking the far left and started writing essentially intelligence reports on them. And, this whole thing came about because I saw this back in 2016. I saw this woman. She was a Trump supporter and she was being accosted by this mob. And they're throwing they threw a tomato at her. They threw an egg at her. Eggs hit her in the side of the head. And she couldn't get away. And I just thought, I wasn't even like a big Trump guy back then. But I just looked at that and I said, that's just not right. And so I said, I spent almost 3.5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm very familiar with tracking insurgent groups. Why not I start tracking Antifa and these far left revolutionary groups. And I started doing that. And then people started getting interested in the work that I was doing. And the rest is kind of history.
Man, that's awesome. You must be, you're somewhat prescient there, because I was going to ask you what motivated you to start tracking Antifa. And I recall the episode that you mentioned. They had her backed up against some glass doors. And she had nowhere to go and smashing eggs over and all kinds of stuff. Just horrible behavior for sure. So before we get into tonight's topic, which is really around the importance of doing a local area study, the intelligence stuff that's out there, open source intelligence in particular, Mike Sterling and S2 are going to have an arm wrestle over who does the conflicted question tonight.
Oh, I think we've already got that figured out. I'm back. I'll go ahead and handle it. It's
All
not
right.
an issue. Yeah. But
He's
first,
back.
before I do that, hey, I want to wish a happy Veterans Day to all of you here with us, and these two gentlemen that are here with us, even the crayon eater in the bunch.
I like purple.
Now, last week you liked the green ones. Come on, man, you got to pick one.
No, man, it's always been purple.
Well, and again, to any fellow veterans out there in the audience, hey, love to have you. You guys, y'all stepped up. You did the deed. So, we're going to go ahead. We're going to do the conflicted question of the night. And so if you haven't been here with us in the past, how this goes is I'm going to go ahead and we're going to read it. Then we're going to let everybody ruminate on it for the entire show. And then towards the end of the show, before Mike leaves, because I know Mike's going to wind up having to bail out of here a little bit earlier than the rest of us, we'll read it again. And then everybody will answer it. And we're going to want to hear from you out there in the audience. Right? So we're going to want to hear from you in the comments section. Put it in there, right? Get into there. Get dirty. Wrestle with that pig. So, conflicted question of the night. We're gonna get everybody to do some reps on your morality out here. This is from the Saga of Gordon. After a major event cripples the safety and security of Gordon's neighborhood, people choose to start a mutual assistance group. A little late. The community can choose a security leader from two strong candidates. Would you vote for a veteran police officer or a military veteran that has combat experience? Which candidate's job experience would you trust more to survive? What reservations would you have with both candidates? And we're going to discuss this again at the end of the show.
I thought that was a pretty good question, actually. It was the very first one that popped out of the deck today when I was going through it. I thought, that's an interesting thought, because I think you would find in pretty much any group, there's at least going to be one military veteran, and there may or may not be a law enforcement veteran, but they both bring some unique stuff to the table. Pardon me. So the first topic we're going to jump into is color revolution. And you've written some pretty awesome material on that. And so why don't you go ahead and explain what a color revolution is? Mike Shleby first.
Sure. Yeah, I think when we typically think about revolution, we think peasants with pitchforks and kind of this bottom up uprising, and now of course we're in the long rifle age, and there's multiple different types of revolutions here. And so when we talk about a color revolution, we're talking about a predominantly peaceful revolution. And it may seem counterintuitive to some people, because you think, oh, well, you've got to have arms, you've got to have hard power to foment a revolution. And this is a different kind of revolution. This would be classified as irregular warfare, something we also call low intensity conflict. And it is a revolution aimed at undermining the three pillars of a government, which is legitimacy, authority, and capacity. And so you use political warfare, social warfare, economic warfare, and you erode the foundation of a government. And eventually enough people withdraw support from a government, or from, in certain cases, a dictator or dictatorship. And then once you erode that legitimacy far enough, that people essentially change their allegiances. We're often talking about a shadow government, and it's just like, legitimacy is really an issue of the people. Whichever government the people supports is the real government. If no one recognizes government B, then government A is the legitimate government. And so really it's all about reducing support, reducing legitimacy for an existing government, creating a shadow government, giving that government legitimacy until the other government collapses, because it has no authority, because no one listens to it.
Mike, just for posterity's sake, could you give us a couple examples of where this has happened elsewhere in the world?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, Euromaidan back in 2014 in Ukraine is like a really good example. Yanukovych was in power there, and then there was a many people are saying CIA-backed color revolution to install Poroshenko. And so that was there's always going to be some violence in these, but it's predominantly people power. It's political warfare, economic warfare. The color revolutions back against the Soviet Union. I mean, the Baltics, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland. More recently, there was a failed color revolution in Iran back in 2009 when Mousavi tried to essentially, and I don't know if this was CIA backed or not, but they tried to oust Ahmadinejad. You probably remember that guy back in Iran in 2009, the Green Revolution. And so what happens is these people pick a color, and that's why it got the moniker color revolutions. They all use the same color, and that is a representation of the movement, a representation of the solidarity that they all have. And let me just say one other thing too, briefly. John Boyd said this in the most succinct way possible. He said, grand strategy is the attempt to connect yourself or your movement to as many power centers as possible while simultaneously removing or disconnecting your opponent from as many power centers as possible. And when we talk about legitimacy, it is who recognizes a government as being legitimate. And so if you can get enough powerful people and powerful institutions to recognize you as a legitimate government and not recognize or actively oppose the existing government, then you have a color revolution on your hands.
Can you give us some examples of those power centers?
Yeah, sure. In a lot of countries, there are institutions. There's media. Media is a good one. I mean, look at what happened against the Trump administration back from 2016 through 2020. We had a very hostile media just constantly launching accusations about the illegitimacy of Trump. And then you have social, what's called social power, these social institutions like the political and social organizations. Also the community organizers, it's like you're trying to build a mass movement. We're talking about mass political defiance. This is mass mobilization protests. And you get enough millions of people out into the street saying, we don't recognize you. You're an illegitimate government and we want you to leave. That has been the tool for, I would just say Western backed and CIA backed color revolutions for decades now.
Okay. Yeah. Really interesting. Mike Sterling, I want to get your input on this and then S2.
Yeah. Didn't Barack Obama discuss this in an interview back in, 9, 10, something like that, about basically muddying the waters enough so that eventually nobody trusts what's coming out from the government because you're just spreading enough misinformation long enough that nobody knows what to believe anymore. And then you step into that vacuum.
Yeah, I would say that's all an attempt to undermine credibility. So we're looking at three pillars of government: legitimacy, authority, and capacity. So legitimacy is getting enough people to not recognize the government or recognize an alternative government, like a shadow government. And then attacking the authority would mean, could be undermining credibility, could be characterizing certain attempts to enforce the law as immoral or illegal, essentially saying the government doesn't have the authority to try to do what it's doing. And then capacity is the manpower and resources. And if you starve a government of manpower and resources, it no longer has the capacity to enforce the laws. And so you attack those three pillars of government, and at a certain point, the government stops functioning. It runs out of money, it runs out of support, it runs out of manpower. And then the only solution is to implement a new government that the majority of the people will recognize.
This is a really interesting formula, the way you've described it. I'm aware of these happenings, but I didn't really connect all the dots together as far as how they're all working together like that. S2, love to hear your thoughts on this color revolution, because you've mentioned it multiple times on the broadcast.
Yeah, well, Mike's dead on with all of that stuff. But here's the interesting thing is that I think this is going to sound very strange, but I think that's exactly what Trump did or is in the process of doing right now. The difference is he's doing it in reverse. He's won the election, so he's won the Electoral college, he's won the popular vote, so that makes him legitimate. And once he's inaugurated, he goes back in and he starts undoing all of the things that the illegitimate government did. So what I see him doing is he's doing a color revolution of his own, only in reverse.
Really interesting comments, because actually, as Mike was describing what happened in 2016, I was thinking the same thing, that it was in reverse. It was the deep state trying to basically, harm Donald Trump's, I guess, credibility by
It's a
attacking.
tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, it's an extremely interesting topic.
It's right out of the communist playbook. I mean, the communist playbook is just they're not creative, so they always end up doing the same things over and over and over again. They just can't deviate from it. There are small little things that they try to make a fork out of, but then they end up going right back onto the path of the playbook all over again, every time.
Very interesting. So I want to pivot to one of the most interesting subjects that's been brought up in our conversations on Survival Dispatch News, and it's the importance of doing a local area study. What is a local area study? I don't know if you know this, Mike Shleby, but Mike Sterling was telling us probably a year ago or something like that, how he followed your protocol and wished he had done it sooner. And I'll be honest, I haven't done it entirely either, which is why I bought that book off your website today. But go ahead and explain the concept of the local area study and what type of resources are out there to help people.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for the support. And yeah, I mean, this stuff is not rocket science. All I've done is I've taken this, what can be an incredibly complex topic and process, and boil it down to a community level. So we do an area study because for two reasons. A, we have to know what we're up against at the local level, and B, we have to know what we're working with. And so when we talk about what we're up against, we're talking about threats and hazards predominantly. It doesn't matter if we go to war with China, if we get into a nuclear war with Russia, if there's hyperinflation, if whatever happens, that ultimately we're going to feel the effects at the local level. And so if we're not aware of the local threats and local hazards, regardless of the kind of big picture strategic scenario, if we don't know what we're up against at the local level, then we're just not prepared for it. And so one of the things I've found is people get really hung up in the axle about what the big catastrophic thing. And it's like, well, regardless of what happens, how's that going to affect you out your front door, down the street, in your neighborhood and in your community? Because ultimately, those are the things that we actually have to prepare for. This is really a problem of proximity. We go to war with China, there may be cyber attacks. Most of that war is going to be fought in the Indo-Pacific, but we are going to feel the effects locally. And so that's really what I want to encourage everyone to do. There's a very formal process. There's checklists. There's also, I give people collection requirements in the book, lots of like 150 or something like that. Wow. Basically just considerations to look for. And this is as complex as you want to make it. But, ultimately we have to do a local threat assessment, because that is going to tell you exactly what you should be preparing for. The flip side of that is it's not enough just to say, well, these are the threats and these are the hazards that I may encounter or that I'm probably going to have to deal with. There are also other individuals. And the number one question by far that I get from readers and viewers is, Mike, how do I find like-minded people in my community to link up with? And that's what this part of the book is really aimed at, looking at those assets and resources and opportunities. Looking at, like for Halloween, we took my son for his first Halloween, and, we just walked around the neighborhood. And, I was pointing out my wife, the Trump signs and the Harris signs. Well, if there's been Trump signs in your neighborhood, like, you should probably go link up with those people. You probably have a lot in common. And so really it's about looking for those groups of the individuals, groups and subgroups of people in your area, how to link up with them, how to build a local intelligence network or an information sharing network, so that, I'm looking for more knowledge, skills, and abilities. I'm looking for more military retirees, veterans. One of the guys in our group was a radio repairman in the Marine Corps. He fixed radios in the Marine Corps. I definitely want that guy on my team. So I just encourage everyone, go out and go to political meetings, to social meetings, social groups, lions and tigers and bears and whatever you have in your area, and just go rub elbows with people and try to find those guys that you may be able to build a team out of.
That's awesome advice, Mike. It's the whole thing's really impressive, this local area study stuff. And I know Mike and S2 are ahead of the curve on this compared to me. So Mad Bomber, Mike, let me hear your thoughts on the local area study that you did using Mike Shlby's SOP.
Well, I'll tell you, I think the big thing that wound up happening out of it, I mean, you know, an area study is an area study is an area study, but I think the big thing that was the real gold that came out of that study was when I went and interfaced with all the law enforcement agencies that work in my area. And so the sheriff's department, they've got a good intel team, very small sheriff's department for a pretty large county. But I went and I sat down with the guy who's in charge of the neighborhood watches, who also turns out to be the head of the intel team. And I started talking to him about stuff, and he stopped and he just kind of looks at me and goes, "Are you doing an area study?" I said, "Well, yes, I am." And he goes, "Okay, well, here." And he starts pulling out more info and more info and more info. And so, yeah, now I'm a source of his and he's a source of mine. So, yeah, now it's a network. But then I went up to the little police department here on the mountain and started talking to them. And, you know, all of 5 officers, they had never even thought to actually be collecting intel, because it's a very small town, very rural, very poor area. So all the intel for those guys is up here because, well, you know, we all know each other. Well, yeah, you grew up with each other, but maybe you ought to actually start keeping a little bit of paperwork, because 3 police chiefs prior to you, the police chief wound up responding to a call for a kid that was in trouble and wound up getting shot in the face in the process. Wow. Had he had that paper, had he had a whole bunch of that stuff on paper, it would have worked a whole lot better. So they're changing what they do based upon what I brought to them, based upon what Mike here told me to do.
That's awesome. That's really interesting. Good to see you, Jeff MD, our in-house CIA operative. I don't know if you've met Mike Shleby or not from Forward.
Hired CIA operative.
Yeah. Right on. So we're talking local area studies. Mike Shleby gave us kind of like the 10,000 foot view. Mike Sterling then gave us some comments on when he did it. I'm pivoting to S2 next to hear his thoughts on this, and then I'll come to you, Jeff.
Well, yeah, I've spent the last 4 or 5 years trying to tell people. This was long before I'd ever heard of Mike Shleby. But I spent the last 4 or 5 years telling people, you need to know who the people in your area are. You need to know where your resources are. You need to know what usable resources you can get a hold of. You need to know all of the details around your area. It's one of the things that I do simply out of reflex, because it's what I've always done. I drive around town and I say, "Oh, yep, I need water barrels." I go get water barrels there. If I need metal, I can go there. If I need wood, I can go there. If I need a nuts and bolts, I can go over there. And I don't choose the obvious locations because that's where everybody's going to go. But like I said, I spent the last 4 or 5 years trying to tell everybody I know within the organization that that I work with, that this is what you need to be doing. And we talk about, I was getting the same question about, how do I find like-minded people? It's very simple. You have conversations. You can have conversations with the bad guys. You can have conversations with the good guys, and they don't have to know you're either one. But ultimately, it all boils down to intelligence. All boils down to humans, always.
That's awesome. That's great feedback. S2, Jeff, your thoughts on? I know we're kind of diving in midstream here, but your thoughts on doing a local area study, your experience of doing that. I guess as a CIA guy, you probably did lots of local area studies.
Well, you're always looking at threat assessments, and you've got to know how to get from point A to point B 20 different ways, all that kind of thing. But I think as far as my neighborhood goes, I almost know everybody in this entire area back here. In fact, I used to have the FedEx person would stop at my house and honk. So I would come out and say, "Okay, who are you looking for?" And they would give me an address. I said, no, don't give me the address. Give me the name. They'd give me the name. I said, okay, back the way you came, fifth house on the right, greenhouse with a ore cart in the front yard. That's them. Oh, okay. Because I knew and know, especially on my streets, in my half of the neighborhood, I know everybody. On the back half, which is another long dirt road area that is not even really connected to mine, I know about half the people back there as well. Because I go back there, I walk back there with my dogs, I stop, I talk to people, kind of get their backgrounds. I know which ones have been in prison and which ones have not. But yeah, you just talk to people. SD's right. Just have conversations. And if they're kind of whacked up flake outs, you go, okay, note that. But I know there's some back here that, they stockpile ammunition. So I know about 4 houses I can go to if worst came to worst and I needed to borrow a couple hundred rounds of 223. I know they've got several thousand.
Yeah, that's great. So back to you, Mike Shleby. Could you expand a little bit further on your new handbook? And also, can you tell me where I find, I'm sure I saw an online course that people can take on local area study for $99 or something like that. Where do I find that on your website again?
Yeah, that's the area study crash course, and it's videos and worksheets. And I'll tell you, I can get you the link there.
Okay, perfect.
I think we'll probably bring that out for like Black Friday and probably just the rest of the year.
Okay.
And yep. And so, there was the first question, kind of an overview.
Yeah, of your book, the Area Intelligence Handbook. I noticed that it's shipping probably this week. Is that correct?
Yeah, we get another big batch from the printers. I don't know, probably tomorrow.
Awesome. Yeah, so maybe just give us an overview of what's in the book so people have an idea before they buy it.
Sure, yeah, of course. Yeah, so the first part is really my philosophy on preparedness, which is I think there's too much emphasis on stuff and not enough on information. In the Army and then as a contractor, you always selected your gear for the mission. And the mission was based on the threat or the local conditions. And so if we don't understand our local operational environment, then how do we know that we're really preparing for the right missions? And then how do we know that we have the right gear for those missions? And so if you don't understand your operating environment, then you won't. If you don't understand the threat, then you can't best prepare for it. If you don't understand the hazards that you're going to face, you're probably preparing for the wrong thing. And so really, I think, one thing I found just from teaching intelligence courses for the past 10 years or so is people would come to the class with a kind of a preconceived notion. I'm prepared for an EMP or hyperinflation or whatever, societal collapse and economic collapse and all this stuff. And they spent so much time trying to investigate and learn and be on the lookout for these catastrophic consequences. And they didn't know who their neighbors were. And they didn't know how to get in contact with their local sheriff. And they didn't know what assets they had in their neighborhood and what resources they had in their neighborhood. So, again, you do an area study for 2 reasons: to know what you're up against, threats and hazards, and then to find out what you have to work with. So the people, the assets and resources and opportunities you have. And I think also another one thing I talk about in the book is economic power. I mean, really, we need to be building political, social, and economic power, because it does not matter. We're political creatures. We live in a political system. Even if there's a government collapse, your area will still have politics. It may not be the federal or state government in a worst case scenario, but you will still be living under some type of political system. The question is, whose political system will it be? And so we need to be developing political, social, and economic power. And so another part of the book kind of goes into, I'm not an expert on survival, so I don't really talk about any survival stuff in the book. But what I talk about is some of the tangible and intangible benefits of having political, social, and economic power. If we think about the political system, these people are making rules that we are supposed to live under. And we look at law enforcement, they're supposed to be enforcing those rules. So if we do get into a kind of collapse scenario, my question is, who's trying to make the rules, who's obeying and who's not obeying the rules, and then who's trying to impose their rules on me. I don't want someone else to impose their rules on me. And that's why I have a neighborhood watch. That's why I know my neighbors. We have great working relationships. No one's going to be able to come into my neighborhood like a gang or cartels. I live in Central Texas. We got Latin Kings. We got MS-13. We got all sorts of nasty groups around us. And so, you know, really I think the other part too is about building economic power, also starting businesses, serving local needs. It's not only a great way to meet people and expand your intelligence network, but if you can start a local business producing a profit, then we can pile those profits into solving problems, because money is stored power, and we can throw money at a particular problem at the local level and solve it before it becomes a much bigger problem. So political, social, and economic power, we got to be building it. We're going to need it regardless of what happens.
Man, that's there's some new vernacular that I'm not familiar with that's pretty impressive. Mike Sterling, your thoughts on the power stuff in particular? Like,
yeah, one of the things that I really wanted to throw into there is on political power. You know, everybody's all focused on the federal government all the time with everything like that. I'll tell you the one thing that I definitely have seen based upon my trips up to Appalachia and doing relief missions up there, the biggest worry that you've got are little small town tin pot dictators. Man, there have been a bunch of them, and they all came out of the woodwork the second things got weird. Man, I am here to tell you, they're all over the place out there. Identify them now using your area study. That way you can keep an eye on them later, or utilize political power during peacetime to get rid of them.
Good advice. Excellent advice. S2, I'd like to get your input on that.
So yeah, I'm also with Mike Shleby on this one. In particular, I made a mention of this when we had Eric Mader on, where we talked about the Agora type economic system, where we start developing parallel economic systems that fall outside of what is the conventional federal government, Federal Reserve system. And that is where you begin to, basically my philosophy is, to defeat them, you got to not need them. If you have your own economic system, which once again, that money is stored power, and you have your own currency, which there's a lot of states out there now that are starting to accept a note called a goldback now as actual currency. So those types of things are being developed, but at the same time, we also have to have our own marketplaces where we can apply pressure to, and this goes back to the political thing, where we can apply pressure to the corporate structures out there to say, okay, yeah, you have a product that we like to consume, but guess what? We have somebody that doesn't hate us, and they make it too, and they make it better. So we don't need you anymore. Bye. Those are my comments.
No, that's awesome, because you just tweaked me. Years ago, we went on a tour of Chickamauga, the national park that kind of straddles Tennessee and Georgia border near Chattanooga. And so it's a huge location, right, where there were all kinds of battles during the Civil War, but they've got some buildings that have gun collections, and they've got, guides who tell you different stories on different battles. But one of the things that they said is, number one, we didn't have iron ore deposits in the South like they did in the North. So we didn't have materials to build a lot of stuff like cannons and guns and whatnot. And when the South came out with a currency, nobody else around the world would take it. It didn't, they had zero power in that regard. So it's just like an interesting parallel I saw in the conversation there. Jeff MD, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think Mike hit on something about local politics. And if you've got three people, you're going to have politics. And where there's power, and that power goes away, there's a power vacuum, and there's always somebody who wants to fill the vacuum. And if you think they're all benevolent, think again. Just think of your favorite most HOA Karen, and then give her real power, or she tries to assert, or he tries to assert real power. That's what you're up against. These are the people who will say, well, we know you prepared, so we're going to levy a tax on you and your food supply to help feed us. And that's exactly what will happen, because invariably, people who fill those kind of vacuums are looking for, how do I make things better for me? And they don't give a rat's ass about you. They only give a rat's ass about you if your survival impinges their survival, meaning if you go away, they go away. In essence, you're protecting them, either fiscally, physically, with food, water, something. So I don't trust anybody who rushes to step into a void. I want the reluctant leader, the one who doesn't want the job, but everybody says, you're the only one we trust. And he says, I'll do it for a little while, and as soon as we get on our feet, I'm out of here. That's the guy you want, not the one who rushes in and says, I'll be in charge. I'll be in charge. Never trust those people.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. So Todd Callender has told me multiple times during his career, he has purposely created a vacuum to see who would rise to the occasion. So not like you're describing, someone coming to him and saying, give me the job, but who would just jump in and exhibit leadership, characteristics and steer the ship in the absence of power. And he says it's one of his best tactics he's had for years when it comes to putting teams together.
And the guy who does, or the guy or girl who does rise to the challenge, normally isn't the one who jumps in there. They're the one that everybody kind of looks to them and says, okay, you're the senior person, you're the competent person, you're the best salesman, you're the best whatever. And they look to them. The ones who rush ahead without any regard for anybody else's opinions are the ones you got to watch out for.
Yeah, well said, well said. So, Mike Shleby, I want to move on to an email that you sent not too long ago, titled Fear and Activism Among the Far Left. And as you've already stated, you took an interest in the left a number of years ago. But I'd like to hear you expand on this email a little bit, and then I'll get everybody else's thoughts as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, probably a year ago, I was 50-50 on if we were going to see riots after this election. And, of course I said, well, really depends on who wins. But if Trump wins, I said, I'm actually not sure that they have it, because I read their blogs. I'm in the chats. I'm in these little nooks and crannies of alternate social media, these smaller social media sites where these people have gathered. And just over the past couple of years, like they say, we're tired. Like we're burned out. No one comes to the meetings. There was this past, the big turning point is every year you have these Antifa types, the really kind of the anarcho-communist revolutionary, the real militants. They hold this event called F the 4th for the 4th of July for Independence Day. And it's just kind of like their middle finger to the United States. And they canceled it this year in Seattle, Washington, which is one of the top, probably the number 2 stronghold for them in the entire country. They canceled F the 4th. And of course they use the real F word there. And I just said, in what universe are these people going to cancel this event because no one's going to show up, but they're going to go riot? And so over the past a couple of months, I just started telling people they're tired. They're still burnt out. They don't want to go out and fight cops again. They were kind of swept up in the moment. They thought this was a real revolutionary rupture. I actually think it was an attempted popular revolution back in 2020. But their networks have atrophied. They're not having the big turnout. The biggest thing too, law enforcement has changed. Last summer, I wrote another article about how essentially law enforcement had adopted a counterinsurgency strategy, because these Antifa kids are being arrested. They're being charged now. The Georgia State Police arrested 61 of them, charged them with RICO. A handful were charged with domestic terrorism. Out in Portland, the Portland Police Bureau Chief Mike Day out there said, we're not going to let these people just run riot over our city again. And we're seeing this kind of stuff all across the country. They no longer have freedom of movement. They can't just go out and do whatever they want. They're going to get arrested and charged, not released the next day. And so a lot of them have expressed fear. They say, we're going to go out. If we do this stuff, we're going to be arrested. We're actually going to be charged this time. And so I just started seeing a bunch of these key indicators stack up, and it led me to believe that they were not going to riot if Trump won because, well, lots of reasons, a few I just stated. And it was kind of unpopular at the time, but over the past few months, everyone's been talking about, oh my gosh, it's going to be 2020 on steroids. It's going to be, pink-haired suicide bombers at Chick-fil-A if Trump wins. And I pushed back. I said, guys, I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing it from these guys. And I think they will try to rebuild. They'll obviously try to relaunch what they did in 2020. They're nowhere close right now.
So question for you, Mike. Elon put out a tweet, an X post, whatever, a few days ago saying that it's far too quiet out there right now. And I know, Mike Sterling and S2 have had extensive discussions on it. What do you make of it that all the Democrats are, putting on this face of plain, fair, peaceful transition? Do you have any thoughts on what's going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, I don't think they have much to exploit when it comes to undermining Trump's legitimacy. With the popular vote, the electoral vote, I mean, it's pretty clear America spoke loudly. And I don't think they have there's not a lot of hay to make for that. And so I think they are kind of in a position where, they've been having these strategy meetings and kind of saying that now what are we going to do? And I think they're going to go back. One of the things I said is that this is going to more closely resemble 2017 than 2020, like the rest of this year and next. And so they're not going to stop. They're obviously not going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they've been trying to do, we just sat through this strategy session the other night from one of these far left groups. And they basically said, we just have to empower political and social activists at the state level to push back against some of these Trump policies. So I do think they're probably in a scenario where they have to create these fault lines and they have to try to undermine the Trump legitimacy. Obviously, I'll tell you the biggest thing, I think it's going to be these mass deportations with, people's abuela and their, grandma getting deported or whatever it's going to happen. It's, just like we saw from 2017 and, through the first half of 2020, the de-arrests and the violence against ICE and law enforcement. I do expect that to happen. So at any rate, just the short version is I think they're still somewhat reeling. I think they're trying to piece together how to build resistance. They want to get back to mass political defiance. There's just not enough support for them. There's not enough. They've been disconnected from a lot of the power centers, and Trump has connected himself to more power centers. So I think that's where they are.
Yeah, that's fascinating take on things. And what's interesting is that you drew a lot of parallels that Victor Avila, JJ Carroll, and Michael Letts from Invest USA have drawn. And all three of those guys said the exact same thing as you. Whoever's physically deporting people, there's going to be a lot of ugly stuff that goes on. There's going to be a lot of violence, unfortunately, for, a relatively thankless job. Mike Sterling, give us your view of this.
I mean, that's what Mike's talking about is exactly what S2 and I have been discussing for the last couple of weeks is, I mean, even if they don't do anything during the election, the next trigger point, big trigger point is the reality is we're going to try to evict 30 million people out of this country. They got enough to fight back. I mean, let's say even if only 1% of them fight back, that's still more than we fought at any given time during Iraq. Spread out throughout our own population, that's not pretty.
Tall task for sure. S2, a couple things. One, I want to hear your high level overview, but I also want to hear your thoughts as far as where Antifa's at this particular point in time, because I know you've been diving deep into that world lately.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what Mike Sterling just said. I made a prediction that there wasn't going to be anything. There may have been localized pockets, and they tried to start their shit up over in Portland. They tried to start their shit up over in Seattle, and that got quickly put down. I have been hearing, Mike Shleby, I'm kind of like you. I'm out there lurking in the corners with all of these things too. So I hear a lot of the same things that you're hearing, but more specifically, I've been actually having conversations with some of these ex-Antifa members And I'm hearing exactly the same thing. They're tired. And what's even more telling is that they're starting to figure out that, hey, if I go burn down that McDonald's down the street down there, I don't have any place to work. If I don't have any place to work, I can't make any money. And it means I don't have any place to live. So I think they're starting to understand the self-licking ice cream that they have basically generated for themselves. The conversation that I had, what was it, Saturday night? Yeah, it was Saturday night, with one of the ex-Antifa members. I was asking them specific questions that I kind of already knew the answers to, but one of the things that makes them tick has been fear, basically been terrorism. They want people to be afraid of them so that people will listen to them and what they have to say. But at the end of the day, and I was told that I was absolutely correct to this, they're kind of like us in certain respects where they just want to be left alone. The problem with it is they still have to play their part in society. And that's the part that, with them being disconnected, and within their own little groups, they don't see how they fit into society. They don't see their little niche in there. So they've created their own little group out there that is their niche where they belong. But in essence, they're nothing more than gang mentality. That's all it is.
Okay. Good explanation. So I'm coming to you in just a second, Jeff, but Mike Sterling, can you comment on this based on your conversation with your contacts at FEMA today?
Yeah, I already talked to them about this. So this is actually a pretty common occurrence. I talked to my friend about it, and he was like, "Yeah, they're constantly shifting stuff around because they can never get long-term leases most of the time, and that's the reality of when the U.S. government closed all these military installations at the end of the Cold War. FEMA used to store all their stuff on those military installations. Well, they closed all those military installations, so now they got to get leases, and those leases run up, so they wind up shifting stuff around based upon the needs for those states. It's wintertime up there in Michigan. We're going to wind up having a hell of a winter. So they were just pre-positioning equipment. That's all that it is.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Apologies, Jeff.
No.
Back to the topic of fear and activism amongst the left, and your thoughts.
Well, I think the scale of Trump's win and the fact that he won the popular vote by 6 million really kind of takes the wind out of their sails. They got all spun up in 2016 because Trump won the Electoral College, but Hillary had more votes, so they could claim we've been disenfranchised. Well, they can't say that now. And I think they're also demoralized because they were listening to the same TV shows, the same MSNBC commentators, reading the same polls that was saying, oh, it's neck and neck, or it's even, or Kamala's going to win, or they believe the idiot from from Des Moines who said Kamala's going to win Iowa by 3 points. And when all of that blows up in their faces in the span of 24 hours, it really, really lets the wind out of your sails. And it's because the people who you believe, the people who were on your side, lied to you for months straight to your face. It's really hard to get enthused about, rah rah, let's go get the other guys. And another part of it is I think they're going to be looking at the reality of, okay, with Republicans in charge of the government, they're not going to be giving me free shit as much as they used to, which means I'm going to have to get a job. And oh yeah, by the way, inflation's gone through the roof the last 3 years. So that job at McDonald's may be a job at McDonald's during the day and Burger King at night. And as far as the illegals go, I think if you cut them off from social services and all the free stuff, you're going to see a lot of them probably self-deport because they're going to say, okay, it's not fun up here anymore. We're not living in a 5-star hotel in New York for free. We're not getting a $350 a week debit card to go buy food with. And oh yeah, by the way, they're cracking down on people hiring us. So we're kind of getting hosed. And I heard one today that someone came up with. I thought was actually a pretty smart idea. You tell everybody, okay, we're deporting you. if you self-report, we will put you on a plane, we'll fly you home, we'll even give you a little bit of money so you're not broke when you hit the ground. And if you want to apply for a visa in the future, we won't keep you from doing that, but you got to go to the back of the line like everybody else. However, if we catch you and you don't self-report, you're still going to get kicked out of the country. We're still going to fly your ass home, and you can never apply for a U.S. visa ever again. And you will see a lot of people say, it sucks up here right now as it is. Maybe I should go home, and then look at it again in 5 or 10 years. So if you get a lot of them to self-deport, that's half the battle.
Yeah,
the criminal ones won't want to. Those are the ones you may end up having to like parachute into Venezuela. Parachute optional.
No, that's innovative thinking. I like that. That's really good. I don't know if y'all caught Tom Homan's interviews over the past 24 hours since Trump announced that he was going to lead the charge. And of course, we worked with Border 911 and helped raise money for them this year so that Tom Homan could deliver the message around the country. And when we saw Tom in person last time, he said, on the first day Trump's in office, he's going to deport all the Democrats. And on the second day, he'll go to work on the illegals, which was kind of funny. But he's a no nonsense, no bullshit guy. And I think that the quote I enjoyed the most over the past 24 hours is the girl who said, yeah, but how do you deport people without breaking up families? You just deport them all together at the same time. I thought that was good. So, all right.
Modern problems require modern solutions.
Ain't that the truth? So,
and Chris, where was that fundraiser held again?
Oh no, the gala was at Mar-a-Lago. The fundraiser was online.
Okay. I was just making sure. That was for you, Mike. That was for you, Mike.
I'm actually holding up a different finger right now for you.
There you go.
You're number one.
Right on. So, Mike Shleby, here's another email that you sent recently in the past couple of weeks. I thought this was pretty interesting, and I think you came at this from a different angle than anything I've seen from anybody else on this topic. So the title of it was Understanding How They Hunt and What the Benefits There Are of. So if you don't mind, please explain your thinking behind this.
Sure. Well, whenever we do a threat assessment or security assessment, or we start to look for our own vulnerabilities, what we're really doing is trying to identify how we are going to be exploited. So we can use the OPSEC planning process or the operations security or OPSEC. And the way that we do that is we start by identifying what's our critical information. So we come up with our own critical information list. This is the stuff that we need to protect. I can't protect everything. I don't have the resources, and some of it's not just protectable. I can't protect everything, but here's what's critical for us. This is the stuff I don't want to be found out. And this could be, I don't want criminals to find this out because I'm going on vacation next week and I don't want criminals to know I'm not home. It could be organized crime, like, gangs or the mafia or whatever. Cyber criminals, corporations, corporations are after our data as well. And we know that just goes to the highest bidder. And who the highest bidder is, I don't know. Probably lots of foreign adversaries as well. And then foreign intelligence services. The average person probably doesn't really have to be concerned about it, but some people do. And so what we really need to do is identify how they're going to collect our critical information. And so we have to understand their collection capabilities, where they look for information or how they're finding information. Back when Vice News was actually a decent journalist outlet, there was a video. And they were embedded with the Mexican federales down in Juarez. And they were driving down this road. And the federales were going to this place to go arrest whatever gang it was down there or whatever cartel. And they're listening to the radio. And as they're driving down the road, this embedded Vice journalist is saying, the federales are listening to the radio, listening to the cartel scouts report on this group of federales driving down the road. Right? Because they have sensors out for early warning. And so, kind of understanding their collection capabilities is really crucial. How are they going to collect this information from us, or how are they going to potentially exploit us? And then we look at our vulnerabilities, and then we implement countermeasures to defend against that. So this kind of goes back to, for your area study, if you do have threats in your area, like active threats, they could be, for most of us, are probably going to be what are called irregular threats, like gangs, mobs, looters, stuff like that. Really understanding what their targeting process is. Are they opportunistic? Do they conduct pre-operational surveillance on their targets? What indicators are they looking for? You know, if you have some bad hombres driving around your neighborhood, casing your neighborhood, trying to find somewhere to break in, what does their selection process look like? Some of the stuff we can get from law enforcement. But what's their selection process for targeting? So we have to understand how they hunt, what they're looking for. And then we have to try to implement countermeasures that make us look like a harder target, or actually be a harder target, and do the things that are going to make them say, I'm not going to mess with this because I want a high reward and low risk. And this is just not a low risk target for us.
Yeah, well said. What would you consider that when somebody's trying to identify threats in their area, and let's say it's something that hasn't been publicized much and they're looking for indicators? Can you give me some examples of indicators?
Sorry. So indicators for like what they're looking for, indicators of bad guys.
Indicators of bad guys, like what the average Joe should be looking for.
Sure. Well, number one, I'm going to crime statistics, as accurate as you can. So we can get on communitycrimemap.com or go to your local law enforcement. Sometimes local news outlets or newspapers will have a police blotter. One of the things I do, there's a gas station right by me, and it's called Fuzzbusters, and they will print out all the mug shots of everyone who's been arrested for like a week or two prior. It's like a little newspaper, costs $1 or $3 or whatever. It's just interesting to flip through there. And most of it's like DUIs and stuff like that. But we're looking for like property crime and violent crime. And I want to exclude the violent crime, like domestic abuse and stuff, because, you know, that's not who we're really going after. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to learn from law enforcement, like, you know, there was one of the guys in our group is a local police officer, and he was telling me about this Afro-Colombian gang that would drive over from Houston, and they would start to rob these houses. And what they would do is they would go, it's during the day. So the homeowners are at work, and they'd go around the back of the house and crack a window or open it up and climb into the window. And it was like very sporadic, and it didn't really seem like fit a pattern. And the detectives were kind of like, hey, what's, you know, this, we know it's the same people busting in all these houses, but we don't know what their targeting process is. And then they started looking at the names, and they're all Asian names, because apparently some of these people don't put a lot of money in the bank. They keep like their cash at home, I guess. I don't know. That's what he told me. And so, well, okay, now we have kind of like a targeting matrix for these people. And so I think the best information is going to come from law enforcement, but look for the property crimes, look for the violent crimes, and probably get that information. Like, you know, what can I do? You know, a big one is in the town where I live for the past few years, we've had a really bad time. All these trucks with like protected by Glock and NRA stickers and all this stuff. You know, so a lot of these guys treat their truck as a holster, and they just leave their pistol in there. And then, so, you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, hey, bust the window and we'll probably find a pistol in here. So I think it can be something as simple as that, removing all indicators that you're a gun owner or that you have something worth stealing, you know, and then we go to lighting and good locks and all that stuff.
That's why I keep a coexist sticker on my Prius.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm gay.
Hey, I'll tell you what, though, an additional great source for that intelligence that I found, in particular in rural America, local preachers. I was astounded at what a wonderful source local preachers are. They know everybody and what everybody is up to.
Yeah, that interesting comment. So, Mike Shleby, back to you just for a second, then I'll give everybody a chance to weigh in on this topic, because it's a really interesting topic. But my question to you, Mike Shleby, I was not familiar with communitycrimemap.com, but what the heck is going on in Ohio? Like,
yeah, so, well, I don't know. we run into a couple of problems, right? And we do this because I teach people how to do area studies, and there's a handful of websites. Not every law enforcement agency publishes their data for public consumption. So some of it's going to be on this, some of it's not. Some of this, like Austin, Texas Police Department, they have their own website where they publish their own crime data and they don't release it to anyone else. Just a couple of other caveats here. That's number one. Number two is we have to be very careful with looking at, sometimes these crimes are mischaracterized. There may be a sexual assault that's just categorized as a simple assault, because if you're the police chief, you don't want all these horrendous crimes happening. So a lot of times they'll just say assault. So the second thing is, kind of be aware. The third thing is the locations on these maps are not exact. It's just in the general area. And then if I can just, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Mm-hmm. And in Birmingham, Alabama, probably 10 or 15 years ago, there was a police chief that came out and said, by the way, Birmingham is perennially, like per capita, one of the top murder spots in the United States. And he said, the murder rate went down by 20%. And everyone's like, yeah, the police chief is making a big difference in Birmingham in the murder rate. Well, it turns out UAB Hospital, University of Alabama at Birmingham Hospital, got some new life-saving equipment in. And so the murder rate went down because doctors were saving more lives, but the attempted murder rate stayed the same. So be very careful. Just because there's some statistics about crime in your area, we may have to dig a little bit deeper. I don't know what's going on there in Ohio, other than maybe the state law enforcement publishes all their statistics to this website.
That's fascinating. So Mike Sterling, your thoughts on this overall, point that Mike's been making of understanding how the bad guys hunt?
Oh, absolutely. So if you don't necessarily know who the bad guys are, what you've got to do is you've got to look at the watering hole and determine, okay, where do they hunt? What do they hunt? Now I can get ahead of them, not necessarily knowing who they are, but knowing who the victim is. And that's absolutely the thing. And we used to do that in Iraq with bombing sites. We wouldn't necessarily know where the bombers were, but we would know where they were going to hit next, and we'd usually wind up getting the boys in black hoods to get out there and stake those out. Sure enough, we wound up catching ourselves quite a few good suicide bombers that way, and by catching I mean them winding up flat on their faces, missing a large chunk of their skull.
Imagine that. Mike Shleby, I want to come back to you just for a minute. I think I found a link to this somewhere on your website. I want to clarify if that's the case, and if so, what's covered in this. Here we go. Disappear on the internet. Was this a webinar you're involved in by chance? I have this vague recollection. I picked it up off of FO.
Yeah, that's a friend of mine, Forrest Garvin, that did that webinar. And so, he has a lot of really good information about digital security and online privacy. And so I sent an email and let people know about that webinar.
Yeah, I think it's continuing to play because I signed up for it. I want to say either this Saturday or a week from Saturday at 8 p.m., something like that. It looks like an interesting topic. So S2, I'll get your thoughts on that because this is something you've spent a ton of time on as far as advice for people and how they disappear on the internet.
Yeah, well, first thing you do is you get your name and your information out of all of the public databases that are out there. There are several services out there that can do that for you. I've spent the last 20 years kind of being under the radar, and that's what enables me to do what I do and kind of get away with it. It's because nobody knows who I am. Antifa once thought they had me, and they were kind of close, but they weren't quite there on the bullseye. And then I just kind of dodged that bullet and kept on going. But, as far as digital privacy goes, there's really, it's like being a hacker. Okay. That was one of my old stomping grounds back in the day under a different moniker, but, you keep moving, and you keep moving. So you become a harder target for them. And one of the ways that we try to become a harder target now is by not be a little more vigilant with who you give your information to and who you expose your information to. it's probably about the best advice that I can give. So if somebody calls you that you don't know, for instance, the things they can do with AI now, all they have to do is get a single voice print of your voice, and they can make AI have a complete conversation with other people using your voice. So that's also something to be careful about, because that does exist now. I don't know what more I can say about this without giving an actual seminar on the subject, but yeah, I do.
You bring up a good point. I know someone who answers every call that comes to their phone. I'm the exact opposite. I have all that crap turned off, but they ended up getting a voicemail that the voice was identical to their own voice. So when they picked up and said, hello, hello, the AI grabbed it. And I don't know if it was intended to be like a, shot across the bow or what, but that is absolutely happening. No question.
Well, and one of the biggest things that I can tell people to do right now, because there's a lot of stuff going on right now, particularly with real estate. It's, this whole home title lock thing that everybody's been yakking about for the last several years. It's absolutely a real thing, but here's the thing. You need to go out there and lock up your credit, put a security freeze on your credit, put a lock on it. And if you need to go take out a loan, you can get the lock or the security lock removed within an hour's time. And then as soon as you're done with that check with your credit with the bank or whatever financial institution you're working with, you put that lock right back on it again. Because where these people can go out there and they can get quick claim deeds on your home, they can take out loans in your name, and you're basically screwed, and there's nothing you can do about it. There are things you can do about it, but it's going to take a lot of time and resources and money, unfortunately, to solve that problem.
So I've subscribed to that service with Experian for years, probably around 10 years or so. And actually I had a company reach out to me many years ago and say, hey, we're having a problem running your credit. And I was like, and who is this? And they told me who they were. And I'm like, I've never heard of you before. I'm not trying to get any credit from you. That's the one and only experience that I have with it. But I agree with you. That's good stuff.
Oh, that scam, that scam is going on right now as we speak. I get text messages from people telling me that I've opened up a line of credit with them, and I'm like, you don't even know who I am. How are you? Yeah, click this link, and now we know who you are. Yeah, no, I report them as spam and say goodbye.
You guys are missing a great opportunity to stir the pot and give a whole bunch of misinformation during those moments. I mean, I get those calls from time to time if I'm on the road, and yeah, I'll drag them around for 10, 15 minutes, giving them all the dumbest information I can possibly think of. Yeah. Oh, I have a good time.
Sometimes if I feel like fucking with them, I'll act like I don't speak English.
Right on. So Jeff, I want to get your thoughts on understanding how the bad guys hunt, and then we're going to go to the last topic tonight, which is terrorist like rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, I echo pretty much what all the other guys have been talking about. Is you got to be aware of where you are. You got to be aware of where they want to be. If I'm a pickpocket, I'm going to go to a high-end public event with a shitload of people, because people are bumping into you in the crowds and all that, and they get your wallet, get your phone, whatever. On the house stealing house thing, one thing I would suggest people do is talk to your county. Our county, I'm in Pinal County in Arizona. They have a service which is free, that if anything happens to your property on their paperwork, anyone files any paperwork, anyone tries to access anything, you get an alert. So if someone someone drops a fake quitclaim saying they own your house, you're notified right away, because that has to be filed with the county. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper. So a lot of counties will, preemptively let you know if anything strange has happened with your paperwork. Now, as far as, how they hunt, it's logical. And we've talked about it 1,000 times on the show about where to go, when to go there. If you show up and the hair on the back of your neck is standing up, trust your gut. Your instincts are there for a reason. People who don't have instincts, their ancestors died many, many generations ago. It's like a slow running gazelle. Okay. That's why there aren't very many. They don't last very long. So trust. The reason you're alive today is because your ancestors trusted their instincts and it saved their life at some point.
Okay. Yeah.
And OSHA. I blame them and EMTs. They're getting in the way of natural selection.
Yeah, Darwin, Darwin should be sainted because he's just, just let it happen, man. Yeah, I'm all for stupid people removing themselves from the gene pool. And my wife, God bless her, she's going to sound horrible about this, but she goes, I'm pro-choice because only liberals have abortions. And that means less liberals.
That's too funny. So Mike Shleby, coming back to you, here's another email, I believe that, from your gray zone research. Number one, maybe share with the audience what gray zone research is, and then speak to these, I guess, were these posters that were put out with this terrorist rhetoric, Mike?
Yeah, they were. Yes. Gray zone research is just a place for me to write stuff about the far left and stuff about insurgent, low intensity conflict. That is or irregular warfare. That's a term that includes things like violent social movements, terrorism, insurgency, popular revolutions, color revolutions. And that's really what I'm most interested in and most fascinated by. So that's what I study and write about. But yeah, these were some posters that popped up on one of the Antifa blogs. And one of the posters says, we should all be terrorists. The second one says, from ATL, or from Atlanta to Palestine. And then the third one says, defend indigenous land and people. And, just thinking through this, going through the analysis phase of, gathering this information, it's the intel cycle, right? So we, some stuff happens, we get the information back, we go through the analysis and I started course of action development. And so I said, well, if these people don't really have like the freedom to riot, if they can't just go out and slam, trash cans in a Chase Bank and go firebomb a Starbucks and go set a cop car on fire, what are they going to do? And honestly, I think there's probably like 0.5%, maybe up to 2 to 3% of the far left that will say this is worth dying and killing for. And domestic terrorism has long been a plank of the far left, going back to the 19-teens with the anarchists and socialist movements back then, and the Palmer raids, and the basically this anarchist revolutionary anarchist group sent basically a pipe bomb to Mitchell Palmer, who's the attorney general at the time. And so there's just been a long history of this. And I think there's probably 0.5%, maybe up to 3% of the far left that will say domestic terrorism, but they're not going to call it domestic terrorism. They're going to call it, revolutionary direct action or something. But I think there's a certain portion of that movement that will say, we're going to go out and be violent. If we can't hold direct action demonstrations, then we're still going to let people know that we're going to let the fascists know, we're going to let the authoritarians know that, we're still a revolutionary movement and we're not just going to take all the stuff lying down. I don't think they will be particularly successful in their aims of directing politics. Terrorism is violence against civilians for political aims. I don't think they're going to be successful. But one thing they could do, and if you just put your insurgent hat on for a second, one thing an insurgent is always needs to be doing is drawing an overreaction from the government, because then they can point the finger, or probably not the insurgents, but then the media elements, their auxiliary, can point the finger and say, oh, look, what the government's doing is illegal, or it's an overreaction, or they went and killed people, they went and arrested people. And see, they're the fascists and the authoritarians that we tried to warn you that they were. And I could see something like that happening in the first year of the Trump term, especially because Trump is pro-Israel, and a lot of the people on the far left are anti-Israel, they're pro-Palestine. So I think that is a course of action, probably among the most dangerous courses of action. But all this violent rhetoric, the terrorist rhetoric, I mean, we're seeing it right there. That poster, these people are talking about it. So I guess we'll see. But that's one of the things that I think a small minority, a fraction of a percent, could pursue.
Well, searching for a dramatic overreaction, that's the bread and butter of the Palestinian terrorist groups going all the way back to the beginning. I mean, they learned that from the Islamic Brotherhood. That is exactly what they do. That's what they search for. That's why you wind up them, holding a small child. Oh, my child's dead. And then the kid kind of, breathes. You're like, okay, come on now. You guys aren't doing very good at this.
So
Here's the irony. Here's the irony of all of that. Is that's exactly what our federal government's doing. They've been trying to bait the American public into overreacting when it should be just the opposite.
So, question for Mike Sterling, S2, or Jeff, because I can't remember exactly how Keith stated this, but Keith Graves a while ago said that it's not like you just flick a switch and boom, all of a sudden you have all these riots. And he was describing the process of what happened in 2020, when he was still working in the Bay Area of California. Do you guys recall what those steps were to kind of build it up to the point where you actually start having all the riots, peaceful protests, and burning stuff down?
Well, you've got to stir up public sentiment for starters. You have to have a cause to go after. So you have to identify that cause. The second piece of that is you have to identify what you're going to use to accelerate that event. And then thirdly, you need to figure out what you're going to do to trigger that event, and then be able to find a way to continue once you begin, because the whole idea is you don't want it to die down. You may want it to come down to a low roar, but then you want to be able to bring it back up so that you can control the crescendo and decrescendo of those events that you're trying to basically wear people out.
So when you're saying cause, you mean something along the lines of like the George Floyd riots, that sort of thing?
It could be that. It could be the plight of the, they put the illegals in cages down there, just something to draw attention for certain groups of people.
Okay, sounds good. Jeff, do you want to add anything to this as far as the terrorist-like rhetoric of the left?
No, I mean, it starts with protests, and then it builds up to rioting, and then it finally builds up to people doing terrorism. And it's just, you start with a broad group, and there's always a smaller subset that is willing to go a little bit further, and within that subset there's another that'll go further and go further, and then the smallest subset is probably the guy who's willing to blow himself up, or as we saw that one idiot who set himself on fire. And it's like, and those, if they just kill themselves, okay. Thanks for taking yourself out of the gene pool.
The best suicide bomber in the planet, the one that only kills himself.
Exactly. But in any large group that is motivated by an issue, you're going to see this pyramid, and the bottom is relatively normal people. But within them, you can keep selecting and selecting and selecting until you get some idiot who's going to do a terrorist attack.
Sounds like the FBI.
Morons too. They can be easily manipulated.
Yeah. All right. So, as per usual in Survival Dispatch News, once we've discussed the topic, we have action items for our audience, things you can do to either improve on the situation or solve a problem or contribute to the overall goodness of society. So we put together 5 bullets, and then I'll have everybody weigh in if they want to add additional stuff. But first and foremost, follow forward observer. So Mike has a daily sit rep situation report, and I've been getting it for several years now. And he's ahead of the curve on many, many things. And even when he's not ahead of the curve and he's out of the gate around the same time as everybody else, he typically has very unique perspective. So it doesn't cost you anything to sign up for his sit rep, but there are other opportunities you can have to support him if you so choose. There's also another list called the early warning briefings, and that's really worthwhile getting the information on, because it speaks to the one topic that we get asked about more than anything, and that's situational awareness. How do you elevate your awareness of things? So highly recommend that. Mike also has live seminars and he also has live in-person seminars. So they're not just online; they're both in person as well. I see a bunch of them in North Carolina, Mike. I don't know if you've got a home base there or something, but those are my recommendations. And actually, the biggest one of all the stuff that we put together is do that local area study. I'm a slacker on that one. I started it and haven't completed it. So,
Chris, you only have 3 people in your neighborhood.
I wish. So, Mike Shleby, did I miss anything there that you would recommend to people?
Yeah, I would say, the book is the Area Intelligence Handbook. It's the soup to nuts step-by-step guide for how to build an area study, and that's at grayzonestore.com, gray with an A.
Yeah, I can't wait to get it. I'm really looking forward to that. Mike Sterling.
I think the only thing that I could possibly add to all that is when you're doing these things, start small, work your way out. So start with your family, then your neighborhood, then your local community.
That's interesting. Good to know. S2, this is clearly in your wheelhouse.
Start having conversations with people. Like I said, you can talk to the good guys, you can talk to the bad guys, you can determine who the crazy ones are and who they aren't, but you got to identify the threat. The other portion of it is up your self-awareness, up the awareness of the environment that you're in, and understand that we are not living in normal times right now. And things do happen, and they happen spontaneously for whatever reason.
Good advice. Jeff?
Yeah, I would just say, get to know all your neighbors and then evaluate them. Who can you rely on in a pinch? Who's going to have your back? Who's going to be someone you may have to take care of them? But if something happens to you, you fall, you break a leg, who can help you? And that can be physically, who's got medical training, who's willing to come by and check on your family, that kind of stuff. So know who you can trust and know which ones, I'm not saying, cut them, cut and run and let them go, but the ones that push comes to shove, they're probably not going to be behind you. You need to just get to know your neighbors and evaluate them.
Good advice. Good advice.
And don't do like I do and start off the conversations with telling your neighbors that you hunt pedophiles in your spare time.
Right.
Unless they are one and then they move out.
But you should know that before you even wind up at their doorstep.
True.
And then now I'm here, and you know why I'm here, and I know why I'm here.
Why are you still here?
All right. So before we do the conflicted question, just a couple quick comments. Number one, if you want the links for everything that was described tonight, head on over to patreon.com/survivaldispatch. You can sign up for a free account. I publish our briefs over there every day for every episode. Paid members get some additional stuff. They get an invite to our encrypted signal chat. So S2, Mike, Jeff, everybody puts a ton of intel in there. I just can't believe how active that channel's become in 2 short weeks. And there's behind the scenes content, early access to content, et cetera, et cetera. I want to just quickly address, somebody asked what authority Tom Homan would have. There's less than zero chance of Tom Homan getting congressional approval, to lead a body or to be the head of like the DHS or anything like that. So his position, as Trump announced, it will be more of a cabinet position, but Tom Homan carries a lot of weight. And if Tom Homan isn't happy with something in the process of cleaning up the border and deportations, he has Trump's ear. I've been on the phone with Tom Homan numerous times, and he said, "Oh, sorry, President Trump's calling me. I'll get right back to you." President Trump leans pretty hard on Tom Homan because he's a preeminent subject matter expert. So I don't think there's any concerns of him not getting his way. So Mike Sterling, bring it home with the conflicted question, please.
Okay, conflicted question of the day. So again, like we discussed earlier on, this is how this is going to go. I'm going to go ahead and read this. The panel here is going to go ahead and answer it, but we want to hear from you out there in the chat section. Put your answers in there. Fight about it. Come on. I want to see some blood in the comment section today. Come on. You guys have been slacking on me. All right. So from the saga of Gordon, after a major event cripples the safety and security of Gordon's neighborhood, people chose to start a mutual assistance group. Again, a little late. The community, but better late than never, of course. The community can choose a security leader from 2 strong candidates. Would you vote for a veteran police officer or a military veteran that has combat experience? Which candidate's job experience would you trust more to survive? What reservations would you have with both candidates?
I like this question. This is a good question. So we'll go to Jeff first, as usual.
Of course, thanks for that. Again, it depends. Everything depends. If it was it depends on how bad things are. If you've got roving gangs terrorizing neighborhoods, I want the military guy. Because when push comes to shove, their job is to kill people and break things. And as long as they're killing people and breaking things that aren't me or mine, I want them on my side. Because if it's really a shit hits the fan situation and we're talking, Walking Dead kind of stuff, cops are trained to follow certain rules. They're maybe better at engaging with people one-on-one. But if you're in a situation where there really are no rules, I want the guy who's not going to hesitate because he's worried about the rules. So I'd have the military guy.
I'll go second, and I'm in agreement with you. Preferably, if I had my choice, it would be a spec ops trained guy. And, because their training's been next level and all the other reasons that you mentioned. And if there wasn't somebody like that available, then I wouldn't have a problem with choosing a law enforcement officer either. I think as, job experience, I'm going with the spec ops guy, like you said, is used to, being in a, crazier environment. But reservations with both candidates, the only reservation I would have is, and I've seen this in private industry, is that if you take somebody who's a career law enforcement officer or career military person, their expectations of others in the private industry doesn't always line up. So they expect people to, fall in line like they would if they were law enforcement or military. And that would be, the only reservation, but I think it can be overcome. I mean, I've seen it go both ways. Mike Shleby, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm with Jeff. I think everything's mission dependent. And I would say it depends for another reason. A military veteran a fuel specialist in the Air Force is a veteran. And lots of people can have combat experience. So I think it really, for me, kind of depends on what the experience level is and what the rank is. I mean, you can have combat experience as a PFC where you have not commanded anyone, or you could be a sergeant, E5, like be an E7, you could be an infantry captain. Like that's ideally the guy that I would put in charge of base defense operations. So I'd probably say I would lean more towards the military experience guy, but let's get this cop in a public facing role too. Like Jeff said, they have street smarts. They're used to talking with people. A lot of them have training on how to talk to people. And so a military guy may be more like, I'm in charge, you will do this. And so I don't know, maybe there's a place to get both involved at some level.
Yeah, good advice. S2.
You're muted, S2.
Paging S2.
Cricket.
Bathroom break.
Maybe we're having technical.
It's hard to find good help these days. I'm telling you, man.
All right, Mike Sterling, bring it home, and Mike Shleby. After the bumper plays at the end here, if you hang out, we usually do a quick after the episode meeting. Mike.
Okay, yeah, I'm absolutely with Mike on this one. It all depends exclusively on the vet and the cop. What kind of what is our Met TC going on here? What's our current situation? What are the needs and the like, right? There's a lot of situations where, I would prefer to have the cop. Like, we've discussed about church security groups. I want a cop out front. I don't want a vet out front, because cops are trained to de-escalate. So, depending on the situation that you're in, if I'm going to need de-escalation, man, that cop's going to have to be out front. And you may even be in a situation where they both work together and just shuffle based upon the current situation of the day, who's going to be doing what. But yeah, if like Mike said, if you've got a guy that was a private first class who, okay, he was a private first class and he was a truck driver. No, man. No, God love him. He's probably got trigger time, but what good is that really going to do you? So yeah, these things are a whole lot more nuanced.
Fair enough. There's my buddy Gerald from Georgia, and he worked in law enforcement for years, and you can see what his thoughts are. S2, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Everything went dead for me again.
All right. So go ahead and give your answer, and we'll wrap this thing up.
So what Jeff MD said, it depends. Define combat experience, define veteran police officer. What did they do? Were they in leadership roles? Each one of them has a specific function in whatever society they live in. However, in a shit hit the fan world without rule of law situation, I could go either way. It depends on what my environment is and how it is. If we have a fairly, I don't want to say calm environment, because in those situations, nothing's calm, but if we have situations where we have the populace who's armed and ready to defend their own communities, we may have a lot of military people within those communities that we might want to have a police officer there that has the ability to get intel on the ground. That's their lay of the land. We don't know if we talk about a military veteran with combat experience. Well, gee, flying airplanes and dropping bombs on people is combat experience, but that doesn't necessarily equate to what you're going to do on the ground. If it was a Green Beret, I would probably say, yeah, I'd go for the Green Beret, because they're trained to go from environment to environment to environment and adapt. Or a Marine Corps recon guy. They're all trained to go from environment to environment, adapt, and learn how to build those communities to their favor. So the only reservations that I would have with both candidates is that, dependent upon whether they were in leadership or not, in conflict, tyrants always rise to the top, or I should say they float to the top, and they're usually the first ones to float. So you really have to kind of evaluate. You have to evaluate the candidates based on what their experiences are and what their demeanor is.
Okay,
well, if only you had been here for that.
Okay, perspective. Barney Fife was an experienced police officer, and Forrest Gump had combat experience.
Nip it in the bud.
Got the bullet right here.
Shot me in my buttocks.
That's right.
Oh my God. All right. Well, listen, I appreciate everybody's time on the panel this evening. Appreciate everybody out there following Survival Dispatch. Go check out forwardobserver.com. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and God bless America.
Hoorah.
If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.